Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dragon Prince video. This is going to be my review for The Dragon Prince Book 7 Dark, which is the fourth book of Mystery of Aravos. It's, I guess, the finale of Mystery of Aravos, and it both is and isn't the final season of the show overall. I am very confused about the current status of the show. I think the idea is that, look, if this does super well, Netflix will confirm them for more seasons. I think the big problem in all of this that has, I think, affected some of the opinions out there on the show is just that I think a lot of people assumed that regardless of if they do or don't get the extra books, that they were extra books, that they weren't books required to have the show have a proper ending, that Book 7 Dark was, in regardless of the situation, a finale to the series up to now, which isn't really the case with what way they did this book, and especially what way they did the ending and a lot of the stuff in like the final 2-3 episodes. For this to be a satisfying conclusion to The Dragon Prince, they need a final arc. They need a book 8, 9, and 10 probably at the very least. And my thoughts and expectations, what I had looked up and stuff like that, I was kind of running with the idea that when they said they wanted to do more, that it was going to be this separate arc. Like, we would fully resolve and do everything with the Aravos arc, and this would just be the, in the future, here's some other issue that comes up. It's not specifically Aravos related, or we're doing the prequel story about the Orphan Queen, that sort of thing. That's what I was expecting to be kind of coming out of this with. That, like, yeah, I could do it more Dragon Prince. Not where I'm at right now, which is that we need more Dragon Prince, and it's kind of crazy that if they didn't know they were going to get more, that they decided to do Book 7 in this way. Because some of the marketing definitely has been getting across the idea that this is quote-unquote the final season, and it just isn't. And I find it very difficult to really argue that this is a proper finale. It just really isn't. Now, getting into some opinions, that's sort of just confusion about this and where it puts people's expectations. I do think the book is actually pretty good. I think they have consistently gotten better since they've come back for Mystery of Aravos, basically season 4. Got better over time. Season 4 was, I think, relatively weak, similarly with season 5. Season 6 was definitely a big improvement, and I think this is at least on par with season 6, if not sort of better in some ways, because some of the kind of awkwardness as they had to transition away from some of the more awkward book 4 or 5 stuff, that like the show took a while to recover from a poorly executed time skip in my mind. And also, I guess, the production break between the first arc and the second arc didn't help things either. So just weirdness all around, I think, with this show and the marketing, that this is meant to be a pretty popular, one of the more popular animated shows on Netflix. So it's kind of crazy that they have to kind of like overly jump through hoops to like earn the right to get a proper ending. But again, I also would maybe put some of this on just the official communication about if it is or isn't the end. But I will say, like I said, overall, I like the book, but it's not an ending. It's not perfect, but I would say on a moment-to-moment basis, it mostly is pretty good. Now, obviously, depending on how you view specific character arcs, plot points and stuff like that, we're going to have our ups and downs kind of as we go through this. But I continue to maintain that The Dragon Prince is a show that has been, I think, pretty consistently capable of having very, very strong moments. It just is at times a little bit messy and all over the place. That I think this was definitely a book where I felt like, just from a lore perspective, it just felt like they're all over the place in terms of getting the audience up to speed with relevant information. And it just felt a bit desperate at times what they were having to do to kind of keep us up to speed with what's going on. And it's stuff that we probably should have heard about a while ago. And even then, I still have confusing points about certain elements of what's actually going on here. But certain character moments are very strong, as we'll go through the episodes, of course. So, interesting stuff with this one, but I would say I'm still positive, but there's some awkwardness with where we're at. So, let's jump into episode 1. So we open up with the future vision stuff with the kind of celestial elves, Cosmo and Astrid. So Cosmo can see the future. But then we get the idea that the elves don't want to interfere. They can't use what they know because they've kind of pledged to be kind of like, to not intervene. Astrid said she didn't make this pledge, so she is going to leave and do that. Cosmo gives her all of the information that he has, and this is mostly a setup for she will be the one to inform Callum and Rayla, who are kind of separate from a lot of the other characters, that Aravos is back, because that is kept a secret from most groups until key moments happen, which is basically Terry informing like Ezran and everyone when he leaves that group, and Astrid of course tells Callum and Rayla, who in turn kind of bring the plan together to get everyone up to speed. That whole idea. I don't know how strong I feel about how they did this is what I saw in the future, here's the poem describing what will happen in the future, versus here it comes to pass. I don't think it was super great this time out, as we'll get to sort of more towards the end. I think it worked for season 6, not as much here, because I think you can tell they were so careful not to sort of try and spoil what the finale was, that it basically didn't really kind of matter all that much. It was just an awkward position they sort of put themselves in. Overall, episode 1 I thought was pretty good. They definitely set up the kind of Runan creating a lot of drama for characters because it's his return as a character. So there's a lot of stuff with him in this opening episode where, of course, we get the idea Athari can't bring himself to hope that Runan is back, even though his Lotus is active again. Runan really wants to get back to Athari as soon as possible, but Rayla has promised that they're going to stop by Katalis before they head back, because she made that promise to Callum. And of course, they've just seen that Katalis is burning off in the distance. So this is where we get the idea of Callum returns, Rayla will follow, and the whole very emotional arrival, as we just really see the devastation and a lot of the characters, seeing their home in ruins, basically. And this is especially emotional once they, Callum and Ezran interact and all this sort of stuff. But it builds up, of course, to when Rayla and Runan come back. Ezran spots Runan, and of course this changes everything. This creates Ezran's kind of character arc for this season, effectively, because all of a sudden the idealistic, almost like perfect king for the new future now has someone he wants to face justice. And it's this kind of contrast, and it's the kind of Aravos theme across the season of sort of childhood innocence, and there's always going to be some point that changes someone somewhere along the line. And it seems like they're trying to present this as that moment for Ezran, where how do your ideals stack up against, here's the guy who killed your father? Will you keep your ideals running in this case, or are you going to be like, no, he's a murderer, he needs to face justice? And that's kind of the path that they go on with him. I appreciate that they tried to give Ezran this arc, because he maybe hasn't been as much in the focus, because especially maybe in earlier seasons he's been relatively young, but they've done a decent job. This is the first time bringing a more super big plot into play, and I thought they mostly did it pretty well. Even if in the episode 2 and stuff like that, stuff is a little bit maybe more drama focused, but I still think there's some good stuff here overall. So yeah, there is that. We also addressed that, we need to follow Sol Reagan, figure out what happens. This is where Callum and Corvus come into contact with the human vessel of Aravos, though they don't know that's who this is at this point in time. I guess Callum could have died here, but Corvus stops it, and we'll address this in just a second. And then we get, we're going to move to the Banther Lodge rather than just have our kingdom and try and have the throne in amongst ruins, basically. The most interesting stuff for me here is probably the Arvos stuff, just because, again, he is the villain. The plot is about him. It's the mystery of Arvos. We got a really strong final episode of Book 6 to give us some really interesting context with him. So what's going to happen now? Viren is dead. What is keeping Claudia on Arvos' side at this point? This is kind of what he chooses to deal with here. That initially he approaches this by basically saying, hey, there is still a chance Viren is somewhere. He might be in the in-between. And he sort of does his usual thing of not fully telling the truth by just opening up the idea that he could be in here. Not saying that he actually is, but Claudia is still desperately trying to cling on to the hope that there's some way to bring her father back, of course. And this is where we start to bring up this idea of unfinished business, that you go into the in-between if you die with unfinished business. And us as the audience and a lot of the characters know that he died without unfinished business, but maybe Claudia thinks he has, though we'll find out later that she knows this already, which makes her arc somewhat interesting because why is she following Arvos? And we'll get to that. I think it's like episode 6 or 7 moment in a minute. But yeah, we address some moments like, Terry wanting Claudia to move on, but Arvos sort of like pushing her to kind of stay with him and focus on this. And this is definitely the start of the rift between Terry and the rest of the group, realizing that for him to be himself, he has to get away from these two, even if he has to kind of break up with Claudia, which is what we will see happen. The plan is that they're going to use the Moon Nexus and a Moon Primal Stone to, get into the in-between. I don't think they fully explain what the plot is just yet, just that it's related to the in-between. We'll get that later on. They will have to make a Moon Primal Stone. They'll also have to go to the Garden of Innocence to get the ingredients, and this is where we get the comic connection to the Puzzle House comic, and the whole unicorn connection in all of this. Interesting lore drop towards the end of episode 1 that an Archdragon's bite can kill a Star Touch elf. That's correct. I was like, elf? Yeah, correct. Arvos then turns into a small island because his giant titan form is not very secretive, of course. So this is where we see him become the human mage, and this is how he's going to move about in secret because not a lot of people know he's back. That's the big thing that we get there. We move into episode 2, and so yeah, the Puzzle House plot plays out pretty standardly, especially if you have read the comic. There's not too much interesting here because we've seen a lot of the puzzles before. There are 2 main reveals that happen here. The first one is obviously the map itself, which they do find in here, but the reveal is that Claudia could read it in the past, but she can't read the map now because to view this map, you have to be true of heart. You have to be sort of innocent to a certain degree. And Claudia isn't anymore. Terry can still read it, so they have to keep him around. They have to have him there to guide them to the Garden of Innocence. So that's a big one, and they keep from Terry the fact that Claudia can't see it overall. The second thing that actually happens earlier is that we learn that Kapar stopped using dark magic at some point after starting to use this specific avenue of dark magic, which is called self-eating, as a way to extend his life immortality. Not a lot of detail is given here, to the point where it's borderline a bit of a random reference, in the sense that, is Kapar going to be important in the future? Because we technically, don't we still have a spare Quasar Diamond to do the get the soul out of something spell? Though I have a feeling they're waiting to use that for Harrow, though how that's going to work I don't really know, because there's nowhere else to put him necessarily. So are they going to get Kapar out? And then what use necessarily is he? But then is it just to introduce this immortality technique, self-eating? Who needs to extend their life? I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head, so I don't really see what the relevance necessarily is here. But it helps to explain why, he had lots of bandages on him, Kapar. So, answer to a mystery, but it's a weird one. Kind of like some of the lore reveals that we get this season. Kind of weird. obviously lots of drama around Runan's return and what should be done with him. Rayla gets involved, of course. Has he not been punished enough? Viren kept him in a coin for all these years. Is that not punishment? And the whole Ezran thing of like, is it not a new era? Is this the right thing to do, to immediately want vengeance for an incident that happened prior to all this development happening that has helped get the world into this new era? Rayla maybe doesn't help things with the, he's an assassin, he was just doing his job, and the whole like, oh, he's a good murderer plot. That wasn't fantastic. And then there's also the kind of, again, maybe loss of innocence aspect of the idealistic king has to focus on like military defense of his kingdom, and that acceptance that he can't let what happened to Katalis happen again. They have to have a way to defend themselves from something like a dragon attack, even if the focus has to be on how to kill whatever arrives type situation. So there's that. And then, the big thing for the kind of second half of the episode is basically Callum and Rayla sort of betraying Ezran's trust by just disagreeing with him, getting Runan out and leaving. With the big focus being it's Callum having to betray his brother to a certain degree. And there's a big standoff. He has to use magic like against his brother. But they do get away. There's some nice tense moment here where we get another Soren versus Rayla. But it's clear that, of course, none of them are actually going to hurt each other because they are still friends. It's just a complicated, nuanced situation, of course. But they do get away. Going into episode 3, we get the first stage of the Sun Elf and Human Alliance plot for this season, which is basically dealing with the betrayers and especially the focus on Kareem. So Janai spares all the betrayers. It's a big moment. It seems like they're going to be united for the most part going forward, but we have to address the fact that there are kind of two people she hasn't pardoned, Kareem and also Miana. So we get the idea she can't forgive her brother, and is it the right thing? Should he be pardoned as well? Or is this the right thing to do because he was the leader? They add some nuance to this by adding in that Miana is pregnant, and in the background we don't fully focus on her, but later on she'll appear and she will have the change of focus that she can accept being pardoned, not being able to have a leadership position, but just that she will be able to happily live amongst her people, and her children will be able to grow up like safely. And she hopes that Kareem can also sort of see some sense in all of this, which is basically what the focus of this arc is Kareem is still set on trying to somehow scheme or manipulate his way onto the throne and be the most important one, and he thinks everything that Janai says to him is some sort of a manipulation, even though he's the one mostly doing the manipulation. And there's a big sense of frustration here, as just you see she's just trying to reach out to him to a certain degree as a sister, but he just can't see past his own ambitions. And it's actually a pretty well done arc because he's such a hateable character that you kind of want all the characters to give up on him, but then they stick with it enough that you're like, wait, actually, is this going to work? And then we get the payoff we get for this at the end, which we will get to. So moving on to the Garden of Innocence plot point, we find out that this is a unicorn graveyard. This is where unicorns go to die in peace. This is information that they keep from Terry as well. So if adding on to the lies between them all, of course, they sent Terry off to get 2 Shimmer Crow feathers, a large one and a small one, because they need it for a later spell. But also the significance of one large, one small is that this means he basically has to locate a mother kind of Shimmer Crow, which will come into play for the next episode and the next lie, and the thing that will be the kind of straw that breaks the camel's back for Terry in terms of I can't stay here anymore. So the setup on this is actually quite good. He also leaves so he doesn't see them kind of bring up the bones of a unicorn from the ground, and they basically make a Moon Primal Stone out of this. But to fully make it a Moon Primal Stone, it needs to travel around the world like the moon does. Then it will be what they need. And so this is where the feather comes into play. He uses a spell to give the stone wings so it can just fly itself around the world. They don't have to transport it around. So it'll only take a day rather than potentially years, lifetimes. So cool details here. The lore I took from this was that I guess in general you can make primal stones from unicorn bones. That would fit in with some of the broader lore that we kind of have, because it seems like a bit of a weird connection that like unicorn bones make moon primal stones, but I believe the primal connection to magic that unicorns have is star. So I'm guessing you can make other primal stones as well, but there's different things that finalize it in the end. But they didn't quite say that, I suppose, so it's hard to know. There's a lot of weird lore surrounding unicorns, of course. But yes, we move on from that. This is just more of a reflection on things, but that, yeah, they're definitely portraying, and this gets especially, I think, confirmed towards the end, that Arvos and Claudia have this kind of odd relationship where they are each the replacement kind of family member for the other. Claudia has definitely taken to seeing him as a sort of father figure, and he has taken to, you know, treating her as a, you know, another daughter in his life, as a replacement maybe isn't the best word, but to a certain degree it is, because are they good for each other in some ways? Not really. But we do get the idea that like it is true on his part. He's not just manipulating her. She does, she reminds him of Leola, and kind of she notes that they probably would get on actually based on the descriptions of her. So that is an interesting one, that like when we get into the motivations, that there is actually a connection here, even if there's some weirdness because they are the kind of villains of everything. And then we get, Anya has to show something to Ezran in Durin that will help with the defense. This is gets resolved here. It's a cave filled with huge fire rubies, and this will give them the means to make powerful explosive weapons to defend their kingdoms, and we'll see how it gets used as we go forward as well. Then we get one of our very interesting lore drops for the season as well. The history of the Mage Wars, which I've got to be honest, as someone who has somewhat heavily focused in on these seasons as I've reviewed them, I don't really remember this being referenced before, or maybe this is just the debut of this, because they do seem to get across the idea that this is sort of hidden history. Most of the human kingdoms don't know a lot of their ancient history about what exactly happened to create the separation between Xadia and like the West, effectively. And so this is how it ends up as a wasteland, whereas I think Ezran, all he knew was that we were given the West because it's a wasteland, but here's the explanation of how it ended up like that. And it's that the mages became the kind of leaders amongst humanity once they got magic, and they all started to fight each other, and because they were mostly, I guess, using dark magic, they were consuming all this magical stuff, and they bled the land dry in their battles against each other. They hunted all the magic creatures to extinction, and the war only ended when there was nothing left, no magic resources. And this is how the magic disappeared from the West. So, very interesting thing in terms of, like, I guess the idea is that Arvos, the effect that he had on the world was that he ultimately led to this happening. But it's obviously the question of, he facilitated this at the beginning, but can you blame him for the overall results, which is his sort of like I'm innocent thing from later on in the season, as we will kind of get to here. I still feel there needs to be a slightly more clear explanation of some of this history, because they're trying to fill in a lot of the gaps here, but then I'm like, wait, because Arvos is so long-lived, I'm getting confused about some of the timeline stuff here, and you're not really helping me with some of this stuff. It's a little bit weird. So that's episode 3. Moving into episode 4, this is mostly the kind of moon-focused episode where we see the reunion of Runan and Ithari. And I like how they do this because they link into the earlier scene with Ithari. He can't believe it even when he sees the reflection of Runan behind him. He thinks it's an illusion, a ghost, a spectre. And it's only when Runan touches him that he fully believes it, and he's just in such shock. We get the kiss, the long-awaited reunion. It's a very nice scene because it's been so long kind of coming, basically. We then immediately move to address the fact that Rayla is a ghost. She is banished from the Silver Grove. They have a plan. They're going to do the ritual of the new moon with Keeper Lorenus, who will oversee it. But we see that he is angry, and we'll get the reveal later that he is angry because one of the assassins who died in the first episode, basically, of the series is his son, which will be a reveal from basically the next scene. And yeah, this is what happens here. She basically, to redeem herself, to be reborn, to allow to enter the Silver Grove again, she has to face the 5 elves that she wronged. So we get the sort of the lotus petal for each of them, and she speaks to sort of like a spirit projection of each of them. And she kind of explains her own actions. She explains sort of on the basis of what they each pledged for as they went out for that assassination, how in her mind, her own actions have fulfilled their pledge as well. That sort of by doing what she did has led to, you know, all of this stuff being fulfilled into the future. With the focus one definitely being on the character Ram, who pledged his blood for justice. And she focuses in on this as basically, what is justice? You know, the king did actually die, but is that okay? That, like, you died, the king also died. Is it justice in that case or not? You know, is a life for a life worth it? So she succeeds with 4 out of the 5. The 5th we assume is Runan because he was the other assassin, but actually it's Lorenus because he was hurt by the death of his son and blames Rayla for what happens, of course. And he will never forgive her, and so apparently she will remain banished. And what he says kind of makes her lose her confidence about what she kind of said previously. But we do pretty quickly come back to it here. She won't beg for forgiveness when she talks to him again. And we again clarify this idea of no one should have to spill their blood for justice, that basically no suffering will bring someone back. It won't bring you peace to kind of hold on to this anger and like keep me from my home type thing. And he finally kind of accepts this. And so yeah, the final petal falls, she's not banished anymore, and there's a big celebration with the family, which actually includes Callum here. They bring him in on the hug, which is a nice scene overall. Then on the Arvos side of this episode, this is where the kind of reveals begin to come out here. So yeah, Arvos needs to get the bird, so he asks Terry to show him where the feathers are. This is the key to, I suppose, connecting to the in-between, is that they need to follow one of these spirits kind of as they make their way out or whatever. So yeah, we get the mother bird here. Arvos captures and then kills the bird, explaining to Terry along the way in a kind of creepy way that this is a mother bird who cares for her kind of children. So us depriving her from her children will leave her with unfinished business. So the bird is going to go to the in-between, and this is our key to getting into the in-between because we have a spirit that will go in there, basically. Terry is, of course, appalled by this. He's very frustrated by the manipulation here and really kind of loses it at Arvos a bit here. And, you know, even kind of Arvos kind of uses his connection to Claudia to kind of get his advantage here, kind of revealing that, hey, even she keeps things from you, and like she's aware of everything I was doing here and basically agrees with my actions. And it's just getting across this like shade of grey situation that everyone loses their innocence sort of like eventually type thing. You've kept that for longer than most, but it's time for this to happen, basically. And then we get the breakup scene, which I actually think is very well done. He confronts her about this. He hates that he was used by her. And And he says, you know, that's not how you should treat people, but it's not how anyone should treat anyone, is sort of the idea. And he talks about how he loves himself the way he is, and so he won't let himself kind of change in the way that Aravos thinks everyone eventually changes over this. So he decides for himself, he's going to break up with Claudia and leave because it's not the environment he needs to be in, even if he does still love Claudia overall. Which is a key part of like his character arc after this, is that he definitely still cares about her. They get the Moon Primal Stone, of course, and we end with Terry to sort of make amends for not being able to do anything. He's going to take care of the 2 baby Shimmer Crows, as a little bit of a detail there. So we move into episode 5. The Callum plot is mostly just fun times with the Moon Elf kids, which is fun to see that they're like okay just messing around with him, seeing how different humans are than elves. They then quiz him about his relationship with Rayla, asking like, hey, what would your babies kind of look like? And Callum, I guess, speculates that probably every possible kind of combination of traits is probably possible. And there's some fun stuff as like everyone else arrives back and they're like, hey, he wants to have 10 kids with you, Rayla. And it's a really shocking, funny moment. But yes, he gets his reward, the Moonberry surprise, which gets referenced later on. It's actually a fun little kind of comedy sequence, which is kind of good. And then, yeah, this is where Astrid arrives so many episodes later to reveal that Aravos has returned. So there's that. Then on the Terry side of things, so of course he's going to change sides now. So he goes to Ezran to reveal everything that happened here. It's a little bit awkward. Like I think they maybe overdo it with how long they focus on how awkward Terry is before revealing the whole Aravos thing overall. So we get a bunch of scenes like him demanding basically that no harm happen to Claudia. They do the whole sap swear thing. The big thing here though is definitely that he reveals the plan to us and the other characters about what Aravos is actually planning to do. And this is definitely a point where I heard this and I was just like, why? Why is he doing this? Like, why is this his plan? How does this relate to like him wanting revenge against the other Star Elves for what they did to Leola? He's going to invert the Moon Nexus, release the tormented spirits from the In-Between. These spirits can't survive in the light, so they are going to create an endless night for them by corrupting the sun at Luxaria. Okay, I get it. It's a big supervillain plan, but I thought the whole point is that Aravos is not meant to overly be like that because he views himself as being in the right. We'll get his explanation about this. I think it might be next episode. But I was definitely like, I don't feel very strongly about that as being the plot. I sort of got it as like, hey, as a thing to keep Claudia on his side and kind of tease the idea of somehow Viren could return again. But especially because I guess Leola is not in the In-Between. Like they never bring that up as even a potential plot point that Leola could somehow possibly also be in the In-Between. He could get her back in that way. Maybe it's just that he knows what comes out here is angry and enraged and he wouldn't want that, but that never gets brought up as a plot point kind of whatsoever. So definitely some confusion on me about kind of this side of things. Then we get the idea of how do we get through to Claudia without hurting her. Terry feels we can maybe bring up your mother, so Lyssa. And we address this with Soren, of course. Do you know where she is? Last I heard, she's here. He doesn't know exactly where to find her, but he does have a picture of her. And so this plan gets sort of like set up in the background, basically, that they're going to do something with Lyssa to sort of distract Claudia or get her back on side. We'll come back around to that overall. There is then a scene of Amaya going to see Kareem. They again go back and forth with, again, it's Kareem playing his usual games of, you know, picking apart what people say and, you know, his usual thing of thinking he's above humans and all this sort of stuff. Eventually, Amaya brings in Miana to see him, and they have a conversation She notes that she is being treated well, and she's just kind of focused on her kind of family upcoming in the future, of course, when she gives birth. And yeah, she then questions, this is kind of a key part, she questions Kareem when he specifically refers to their child as specifically the heir. That, like, is that all you can think about? Like, you're just obsessed with constantly, like, this heir would add to my claim to the throne more than anything. Can you not just be happy that I just want our family to be together and happy? Why can't you be like that? That you are basically willing to kind of die for your cause to a certain degree, not accept a pardon for like bare minimum kind of stuff from your sister. Myanna wants him to live for their child, and it's a little bit of a sense that at this point it feels like, I think this has hit him a little bit. I think he's gonna be okay. And even in the next scene we'll get to with him, it's okay, but they still commit with him, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I have it highlighted here in yellow, some key stuff. So yeah, this is where Arvos reveals like the whole idea of like, yeah, I don't always tell the full truth. It doesn't mean I lie, but yeah, there are some untruths in what I leave out, basically. So yeah, Viren likely won't be in the in-between. Claudia reveals that she knows that because he was at peace when he left, and last time she saw him, she just felt that he's not going to have any unfinished business when he leaves. So, why does she still follow him? And, you know, why, you know, she wants to know basically, why are you doing this? He asks her, well, what reason do you have to follow me? She just wants to know the kind of motivation effectively here. He says that the cosmic order must be torn down. But again, she asks why. It's for Leola. They punished her, the other star elves, punished her for a mistake in order to protect the cosmic order. So he feels that it's fitting that he delivers their great fear, the great unraveling. And I'm like, what? Was this referred to overall as a specific thing? Does this relate to the whole Moon Nexus plot point? I'm not really sure. Or is this just the idea of this is why he's continuing to manipulate things, is to kind of, oh, you punished Leola for doing that, I will do what Leola did like 10 times over to make it even worse for you guys, since you don't seem to like chaos and you only want this order. He wants to make them hurt because they hurt him so much. He wants to make them suffer and hurt. The issue I have with this is that this is a season of the show where we never see another Star Touch elf. We get backstory on one of them to explain the Nova Blade, but we never actually covered the characters who are kind of responsible for what happened to Leola. There's a line of dialogue in the final episode, but that's it. And that to me is the entire kind of thing of like, this is why this is not a satisfying conclusion to the show if this is the way it ends up, is because Arvos never gets to do anything against the other star elves. And to me, nothing about his plan feels like I understand exactly what he's trying to do. I get it that if they're obsessed with order, he's going to do something so chaotic that it will upset them, but is that okay? Like, is them just freeing people from the in-between going to hurt and make the other star elves suffer? I don't understand them enough as characters to know why that would be the case, other than that they're oddly picky and I guess would find this to be kind of annoying. This is a massive, to me, miss from the season, is that, to me, Arvos is a interesting kind of character who is somewhat sympathetic, even though he's this master manipulator and stuff like that. They did nothing to overly add onto that in this season, and it's really weird that that has happened. And this is why, like, if we get other seasons in the future, I hope that this is part of it, the whole what this cosmic order stuff actually is. But then also, like, hey, if he's been referencing the end of the season, if he's been taken back to the stars and stuff like that, he'll reform in 7 years. Why can't the other star elves do stuff to punish Arvos in the same way that they punished Leola? Is it that he's so powerful they can't act against him? But then why were they able to do it against Leola? Is it because she was a child? Or is there some detail there about like what that means in terms of like the child of a Star Touch elf? Is that like different? Is she on a lower level because she's not like 100% the same as like another Star Touch elf? And then there's also the idea of like she only had one horn. Is that part of it as well, that she was always out of order because she had that kind of difference? There's a lot of this stuff that they do need to go into here, but again, in my mind, they have not, they made a decision in this season to not focus on, I think, the characters you would ultimately say are kind of, to a certain degree, the true villains, antagonists of things overall. We want to deal with these characters so that Aravos gets some sense of something, but also our characters get some sense of something as well, because clearly the other Star Touch elves believe that humans having magic in any sort of form is a bad thing, and that's kind of weird overall. So kind of a weird situation here where I want to see stuff about the cosmic order and like, is this actually from on high, or have they just decided this, and how does this relate to like the situation in the world where, like we were told, the West had magic. It's just that humans still were never born with magic, but always could have learned it. There's weirdness here in terms of like, again, some of the timeline stuff overall. It's kind of odd. But anyway, that's that. Astrid reveals the truth about the Candy Pearl, and this is where we get into the Dark Callum plot point, which I will also just say, for me, this one didn't work super well either, because I just feel start to finish, this whole Aravos can possess Callum whenever he wants. If he uses dark magic, he falls into Aravos' clutches. Plot point has never been super amazingly well done, because to me, I think they've also made a bit of a mistake by never really covering all that much about dark magic. Ezran will talk about it to Aravos later on, but I still think they needed to really highlight the idea of, wait, what's the origin of dark magic? Did Aravos create it? Is it just, has it always existed? Why did he make the decision to teach them that versus whatever Leola gave to them? That whole idea, just that, get across the idea that Aravos is like the source of this corrupting magic, as to make it just a little bit more impactful overall. But yeah, there's an argument here about like he basically rejects his dark self. The dark self kind of highlights that I'm the only one who can save them all, as in you will need to resort to dark magic to save everyone. You will do what you must, no matter how vile, which has been the motivation and approach of like Viren, Claudia, and will Callum have to resort to that? They kind of use this as like the overall theme in a way of the season, that even someone like Ezran might have to kill someone to accomplish what is kind of required here, and how they're ultimately saved from having to go through with a lot of these things because of the way it actually kind of turns out. This is where they do bring up what I think a lot of people figured out as being the solution to this to a certain degree is, well, if we can't do anything with another pearl and trapping him that way, won't the whole coin trick that Viren has also work? And yeah, that is exactly what it turns out to be. This is a dark magic sealing spell. This will work just as well. It's just that if Callum uses dark magic again, he's basically fully open to corruption is the idea. So yeah, Callum now has a plan. He's going to do things the right way, with everyone working together heroically, basically. And yeah, Callum returns. Astrid tells him everything they know about the future to construct the plan, basically. This is where Claudia and Aravos arrive at the Moon Nexus. She basically avoids a confrontation with Soren and Terry, but walks up the steps and is confronted by her mother. It's an emotional speech, but I figured out pretty early on that something must be happening here. And I think because it's at the Moon Nexus, I was like, yeah, this is probably Lujane. And then yes, it did get revealed to be that in the end. But I wasn't expecting the kind of violence from Claudia at the end, where she like undoes it and stabs her. Now, Lujane survives, but it was still pretty vicious to see her actually get stabbed, and some of the words from Claudia in or around this, which I get to a certain degree once she realized that they actually tried to kind of emotionally manipulate her like this. It probably wasn't the most clever idea, especially because, yeah, they didn't think about aging her up at all, given how much time had actually passed. And then because it was just an illusion, it kind of made all the dialogue kind of pointless, and it was a somewhat lengthy scene because it doesn't represent really what Lyssa actually felt. It was the dialogue was maybe a little bit too obvious by the numbers, but you know, we'll see if they ever do anything with Lyssa overall. So yeah, the Arvos and Claudia perform the spell with the bird, and then they use the primal stone. The spirits begin to rush out. We basically get spirit Zyard. The robes match and stuff like this. They never highlight specifically that is actually the case, but I think they made a somewhat effort to specifically choose this kind of notable spirit of a kind of human mage, and they gave him the moon primal stone staff to sort of command the spirits and do the big spells. I don't think they maybe did enough with this overall. And then there is a quick shot of the being, the kind of homunculus thing, also returning. Not that this maybe amounts to all that much, but interesting little detail overall. And yeah, as Arvos kind of leaves at this point, he reveals that Claudia's necklace that she's been wearing has the last scale of Shiruka, the archdragon. I might be pronouncing that wrong. And this will protect Claudia. She has everyone kind of like frozen, and she leaves. And so when the freeze gets undone, Anya immediately kills Arvos with an arrow through the neck. So his human vessel dies, but he just returns to his Titan form, and he's back in action. But because Terry has now revealed the details in the background, they're ready for him. So he's immediately confronted by Ezran and Zim, and the humans open fire with all the explosive arrows they got from the cave, and he's easy pickings because he's such a large target. They bring him down, pin him to the ground, and we have beaten Arvos. But of course the idea is that his form is effectively invincible outside of, as we learn of course, an Archdragon's Bite or the Nova Blade, which they are going to explain I think in the next episode at the end. We'll get to it. At the start of episode 7, we attempt to do a partial reunion of the two. Callum explains in his letter that I was kind of planning to apologize, but then I got the news about Arvos, and I think we have to focus on working together on this before we address the rift between us, the issues. But yeah, they're going to work together to execute his plan. Astrid's going to go to Lux Aria to warn the Sun Elves that the Sunstone is at risk. Rayla is going to summon Domina Profundis. Athari is going to get Rex Igneous. Soren, Terry, and Corvus are going to get Zubeia if she's well enough. All this other stuff goes relatively well. Athari uses the cake from earlier to get Rex Igneous on side. Zubeia is going to be well enough. And Rayla just uses the stone thing to summon Domina Profundis from the sea. On the other side of things, they reveal that, hey, we're not going to be able to protect the Sunstone from a Star Touch Titan, basically. So what if we just destroy it to kind of ruin the plan that way? And the only way they can destroy it is with a fire mage, a notable one, and that is Kareem, of course. He refuses, but agrees when they kind of explain that, hey, this is... like, you think that the Sunstone will be the future of our people, but there won't be a future for our people if the sun itself is, like, permanently blocked forever. You will need to protect the sun by destroying the Sunstone, and I think he sees the logic in that to a certain degree, but we'll see what happens with him, of course. So yeah, and then the end of the plan is that Callum will use ocean magic to imprison Arvos in a new pearl, which Akiyu will make. So it's basically the old plan, just with new characters filling in the same roles, basically. So it's clever, but also not incredibly clever, maybe, overall. So yeah, then we get I think the episode 7 is all about, like, it's called like the King and the Titan or something like that. Ezran goes to talk to Arvos, mentions all of his crimes. What do you say? And Arvos just says that he is innocent. And he says it's the truth. Like, I'm not your enemy. And he basically goes on this whole thing about how I'm humanity's greatest ally. I have continued to give you magic over the eras so that you have something to kind of fight against Zadia with. Zadia have always worked together to kind of keep humans down, whereas I've basically been on your side overall. And then he brings up the whole idea of, you might not know this, but like, my daughter was destroyed by basically your new allies. With the logic here being, again, because the other Star Touch elves are barely a part of the story, that this is the Sol Regum connection to this, of like, he kind of told the other Star Touch elves about what Leola did. And so this is why Arvos seems to have this dislike of the dragons and elf leadership for everything that happened overall. This is why he has continued to empower humanity to basically counter Zadia. Ezran points out the fact that, hey, you say magic, but you specifically gave humans dark magic and basically corrupted these mages that used it. He basically disagrees and kind of reiterates his point from before, but just kind of points out that, hey, a new era for Zadia is coming. You might want to join my team so you actually have a chance. That Zadia are going to do their thing like they usually do and be kind of anti-human. Whereas if you join me, I'll actually be sort of pro-humanity overall. Ezran refuses this, of course, with the idea, the logic he uses being that, like, hey, you're saying I'm young and I don't understand the situation, but I think you're so old and have hated for so long that you don't see any other way to do it than what you're doing. Arvos then points out that, hey, my age means that at least I know the kind of true history of humanity that you don't know. This might make you think about things a little bit differently. So what we get here is, he says, 3,000 years ago, the archdragon Shuraka battled the Star Touch elf Lorelian. Shuraka delivered a fatal bite, but Lorelian's death created a storm that killed the dragon. And this is one of those things where, like, I was kind of surprised that this was actually the sort of big sort of twist for the finale overall, in terms of, this is why we have to avoid certain things happening, is that there's obviously the weird reincarnation stuff about the Star Touch elves, where if you kill them, they'll be reborn when their stars align. But also, you can only really kill them with archdragon bites. But then the other thing they reveal here is that when a Star Touch elf dies, so when they are killed by a dragon's bite, basically, they effectively explode like a star exploding. And so it does a ton of damage just by default. And this is why it's not just this simple thing of like, I will use this sword to cut you down. No, if you do that, you basically are setting off a nuclear bomb, basically. That's the twist that maybe it was difficult to predict coming. And they tell it through this story overall. That, like, yeah, the dragon ultimately wins this fight, but dies in the explosion of the Star Touch elf. After this point, one of the fangs of this dragon is forged into a weapon, the Nova Blade. So there's that confirmation that the Nova Blade is just a dragon's tooth in the shape of a sword. And yeah, this blade came into possession of Ezran's ancestor, the orphan queen, who helped to imprison Arvos in the past. She took the secret of the blade to her grave, and Ezran decides that, I'm going to imprison you again. I'll kind of take up that blade if I find it and kind of do the same. And Arvos then gets Ezran worried about, like, who are you going to get to imprison me? Like, your brother, who has already kind of shown signs of dark magic corruption, like, really, and puts the doubt in his mind about that can you trust your brother to be the finale of whatever you're planning to do against me? I'm not so sure, basically. But they are ambushed at spirits at this point, including, interestingly, the Magma Titan, of course. So there is that. And yeah, this is the start of this kind of plot point that they're doing towards the end here, which is that Arvos, I guess, sees what's about to happen, that they're going to try and do the same plan that imprisoned me from before. So I get a feeling that, like, I will have to counter a pretty good attempt against me. So what I'm actually going to do is lead them more down the path of, I'll let them destroy me, but once I'm not sealed, I can just come back. And this will create a kind of worse situation here, because the world will be left in a kind of crazy situation, because whoever kills me, I'll basically like blow up and kill them and potentially a lot of people around me as well. And basically the world will be left in just a crazy situation because of that. That's the kind of point here. He's asking someone to kill him. He's goading them. And it's almost the idea that the way he words it, the full details of like, oh, the Star Touch elf, the death of the Star Touch elf killed the dragon. They don't take the mechanics from that in the right way, in an interesting kind of point. But yeah, on the other side of the story, Callum and Runan find Akiyu dead. There will be no pearl to seal using kind of normal magic. They're confronted by Claudia, and there's a fight here. And it's a pretty even match of the mages until Claudia uses powerful dark magic to pull the air out of his lungs. After he had used the kind of bloodbending ocean magic, which is a fun little detail, Runan eventually gets her to stop, because he gets kind of knocked out earlier in the fight, but he gets up and just like has the arrow ready to go. And so this is where we get the explanation of the necklace here from the dragon. And basically when she activates it, it gives her this kind of like dragon scale armor, which is kind of cool. But she has to escape. She leaves her staff behind and basically leaves them with the idea of, without the pearl, is there anything we can do? It forces Callum to kind of believe that the dark magic and the coin is the only solution to this. But you know, he'll lose himself in this. So this is where he asks Runan to promise to do something for him, and we'll get that reveal later on, of course. The cliffhanger for this episode, episode 7, is that Spirit Ziar, the mage kind of guy, frees Avizandum's spirit from the stone. I wasn't super sure of the exact mechanism of this. I guess because of the nature of how he was killed, I guess his spirit was trapped in the stone. So them freeing it allowed it to go into the in-between, but then immediately come out. And so this is why we have angry King of the Dragons back in play. So this is part of, I think, the main reason they wanted to do this overall, was to sort of give him his true ending to a certain degree. So that will be interesting to get to. Into episode 8, we see Astrid, Janai, Amaya, and Kareem defend the Sun Orb. Kareem prepares to destroy the orb, but as Arvos approaches, he decides on, like, I won't detonate it yet, and instead basically tries to bargain for himself and like a better position with it. Like, he basically is like, I see the winner as you, so let me be your flame. And Arvos like lets him walk onto his hand, and then it's just crush. And it's one of the most, it probably is the most shocking surprise death in this show. Though it's oddly satisfying, because really, Kareem, like, after all of that stuff, the scene with your kind of pregnant wife, girlfriend, you still betrayed everyone at the final moment. And so it was sort of satisfying to see him kind of get crushed overall in the end, even though it was exceptionally brutal. And just that sense of, anytime you kind of try and see a positive in maybe Arvos, you kind of realize that, like, he's still doing stuff like that. Like, he admitted in the previous season to basically eating someone, and now he has crushed someone. So add that to his actual crimes that he is not innocent for. So there's that. Arvos then takes the Sun Orb, uses it as part of a giant staff, and is about to block out the sun. And this is interrupted by the arrival of Rex Igneous, who initially gets stopped by Claudia's magic before a fight actually happens. And yeah, this is where the sun actually gets blocked out. But then Rex kind of slaps Claudia with his tail and actually full on fights, and is basically about to kill Arvos, is my interpretation of this. With no interference, he probably would have been able to just beat him there and then. He is only stopped by the arrival of kind of spirit form Avizandum, and they fight, or are about to fight, as Zubeia arrives. overall. And there's a bunch of quick back and forths here where there's big stuff happening in every scene. Ezran gets the Nova Blade from the Queen's grave, and we're kind of pointing out a lot of the situations like, hey, is this the right thing to do? Are you playing into Aravos' plan? Why would he tell you about the weapon that can kill him if he doesn't want you to do something with it? But Ezran is so focused on, this is what I need to do, that he can't see anything else except this as the solution. Zubeia's arrival distracts Rex, which allows Avazandum to bite and kill Rex Igneous. So this is the first death of an Archdragon that we get in the finale here, which leaves us with Zubeia trying to get through to her mate, Avazandum, but he continues to kind of fight back overall. This is where we get the one reference I was kind of looking for. Aravos looks up to the sky asking if they are watching. I needed more than this, but I'm glad that they at least did something like this. But he obviously got no response, and it speaks to the idea of, wait, again, why was Leola punished so crazily for minimal action, but like nothing has immediately happened to Aravos, and like how much control do they or do they not have over other Star Touch elves? It's quite confusing. Like, does someone else have to grab him to get him to the sort of trial in the sky situation? I don't actually know. But yeah, this is at this point Callum arrives. There's no pearl, but there is the plan, the coin. Astrid then tells him this final stage of the prophecy, which is that the one with dark eyes will save us all and choose his own end. So they're really leaning you into the idea of Callum is going to have to use dark magic and will die, basically, or will choose how he meets his end. At this point, Domina Profundus arrives to face Aravos. And at this point, he notes how familiar this all is. You know, everyone coming after him with an attempt to seal him away, everyone united against him. And he urges them to kill him, like, send me back to the heavens, because, hey, you will never win, because in 7 years, my stars will align, and he'll return. They can't ever truly win this conflict. Callum reveals his actual plan to seal him in the coin. I definitely got the impression Aravos was concerned about this, that this would be a way to kind of defeat him more thoroughly, basically. But wait, if you use a dark magic spell, I can take you over like immediately before I'm fully sealed. What do you have to say about that? And this is where the reveal is that the promise he asked of Runan was that the second the spell is complete, kill me. You are an assassin, kill me, to stop the immediate counterplay to what I'm doing. So it is a sort of clever plan here. Do we actually think this is going to happen here? I don't think so, because I don't think the Dark Callum plot has been that good overall. And then I think the prophecy of this and how much they have said or not said about it, it's maybe led you down this road a little bit too much, that there was no way it was really going to happen. I think they weren't actually going to kill off the main character, especially because at this point it feels like there's no way to satisfyingly wrap everything up at this point, so I also don't believe it's the actual finale. Just overall a bit of a weird situation. And then we're into the final episode here, so there's a lot to talk about here. Ezran feels he has to kill Aravos. Anya, as we see, can actually see straight through Aravos' scheme, and so he heads on Zim to the battlefield. They're not going to make it in time, but Zim activates this crazy super speed mode that gets them there in like no time at all, which I thought was quite cool, though I don't really know what it is necessarily, but it's interesting. It's a power-up mode. Runan is taken away by Claudia, that's not from, and this forces Rayla to have to take up the assassin position. And she, despite being very frustrated at what happened in the previous episode with Runan, she will do this. You know, it's her heart for Zadia is what she says, but also that she will make any sacrifice. They both agree with the idea. They will make any sacrifice required for this. So Callum will sacrifice his life if required. Rayla will sacrifice her love. Ezran, to a certain degree, they're playing with the idea as he charges forward, will sacrifice his ideals to a certain degree to achieve victory in this kind of conflict. And then also Zubeia is trying to convince Avazandum to see the light as Zim arrives onto the battlefield here. The being, so the homunculus thing, out of nowhere, right as everything's about to kick off, lands on Arvos' nose as he is tackled by Avazandum because Zubeia has managed to finally get through to him. And this breaks the dark magic spell, which is just about to be activated. So Callum collapses with the idea that, like, he half used a dark magic spell, so a bit of his hair turns white, but he didn't fully do it, so they've avoided doing that. But also, the second this happens is the second you realize that there's no way to, for a very long time, defeat Arvos. The whole "my stars will align in 7 years," they're using that entirely, and you realize, no way, this is the final season. They're committing to, he's going to be killed in some way, and I think the second Avazandum moved, you got the idea of what they were going to go for here. So yeah, Callum collapses as well, so he's completely out of the action at this point. Arvos kind of realizes at this point he's going down, and so he kind of quite emotionally tells Claudia to leave. He says he can't watch another daughter die, so the care is absolutely there. Can you make the point that maybe she's part of his grander scheme of, like, he wants her around when he comes back for his scheme where he can kind of plan against the rest of the world? Because he's definitely leaning into the idea that he feels he has such a negative viewpoint on Xadia and their interaction with humans that if they don't fully deal with him now, there's no way that basically in just 7 years they can sort everything out and be ready for him. That something is going to happen in whatever they will have to do to defeat him in some way. That he will return to a world still in conflict, and he can use that to his advantage, when actually enough seems to have changed that when Arvos kind of returns, it will be a more united world, that he will have a hard time maybe manipulating people to kind of make stuff happen. So yeah, there's that. And so the actual finale happens. Zubeia and Avazandum carry Arvos into the air. As Claudia escapes, Soren and Corvus follow. She has a chance to kill them with dark magic and is nearly about to, but refuses. She says, you know, I could do this, but I'm still nice, and kind of runs off. So she's at a bit of a kind of crossroads here where we still haven't, I think, properly addressed what her motivations are as a character, because she asked Arvos what his motivations were, but then she never actually answered the question of, and after hearing that, this is why I follow you. From previous seasons, I think she definitely agrees with Arvos on the idea of humans have not been treated fairly in the past by Xadians, and because she's really into dark magic, hates the fact that it's sort of so heavily vilified, that this is this cool thing that humans have, and Arvos supports that, and because he's sort of like her father figure is also why we're doing this. But it makes her interesting because there's definitely something more to it here, and you can tell to a certain degree she was sidelined after maybe like episode 5 or 6, where she did a few little bits and pieces to support Arvos, but she was not really part of what was going on here in the finale necessarily. So we'll see what they do with her in the kind of future. So she runs off. Arvos' staff shatters, this unblocks the sun, mostly solving the crisis for a lot of the extra characters kind of fighting off these spirits. And then Avazandum, before he kind of disappears with the light kind of coming back on, bites Arvos. So it's, again, it is the bite of an archdragon here. Kills him. And we get the situation of, because Zubeia is holding him up, Avazandum is delivering the bite. They're both going to die because they're holding him as he explodes. But also, everyone else on the ground is still probably going to be killed because they're so close to the blast zone. So Domina Profundis is going to protect all the humans under her wings, sacrificing herself. And yeah, Arvos gloats that his return will basically be in a world without archdragons. That's the only way he views it, that you won't have these things that turn the tide in your favor, these things that have kind of built-in ways to kill me. You won't have that anymore. I will win basically in 7 years is effectively his point. So he dies, he explodes. Zubeia dies. Domina Profundis dies. Avazandum, I suppose, properly dies, properly moves on, I guess, at this point, knowing that their actions have saved the day, saved a lot of people, saved Zim as well, and it leaves everyone with kind of hope going forward, because they have the ceremony to mourn the loss of 4 archdragons, because again, Rex Igneous died earlier on as well. And Ezran points out, and I think this is kind of an interesting point, they point out that like they nearly gave up everything. Callum his life, Rayla her love, and Ezran his ideals. The dragons saved them from having to make these giant sacrifices by sacrificing themselves. But they've also given them a chance to prepare better for next time. We do get the brothers kind of making up, and then we get the very fun surprise reveal that Zim can now speak, which is another example of, now that you've done this, we need to see him speak a lot more. We need to see sort of him become the next archdragon, because that's one of the big plot points, I think, from this. Arvos is accepting his death here because he's taking out the remaining archdragons effectively. Now, I think there is room for a few archdragons to maybe like come back into things, because there is the whole lore about like what there's a unsuitable heir for the moon archdragon position, and we don't have a clue what that means. Zim definitely has the potential as the Dragon Prince to be the next archdragon. It's just like, in 7 years, is that enough? And then I don't think we know a lot about what specifically it means to be an archdragon and how you achieve that position, in the sense that Zim, I guess now, if he bit Arvos, would not be able to kill him, but there is some condition he can meet to be officially become an archdragon, and suddenly his fangs will kill a Star Touch elf. That's a bit weird. That needs to be explained. But yeah, Zim has Dante Bosco's voice, so he has the Zuko voice actor here. It does seem to be him doing a little bit more of a kind of casual, maybe just his own voice, which is kind of fun. Will they keep that for the next season with there being a 7-year skip or whatever? We'll have to wait and see if we get those seasons. But yeah, Arvos will return in 7 years. They need to prepare. They have to rebuild. Actually, we need to build something new, an important kind of clarification here. And so yeah, we, at the rift, so the gap between East and West, where we kind of fought over in the early seasons, this is where they are going to build the new city, a bridge basically. Actually, interesting note, Miana seems to have given birth and actually has 2 kids, so I guess she gave birth to twins. I don't think they had mentioned that before, but you definitely see her holding 2 children, so that's an interesting little detail there, because they never focused in on her reaction maybe to Kareem dying or anything like that, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, humans and elves together as one. Everyone is going to be in charge, so no specific side is fully in command, and this new city is going to be called Everkind, spelled in this unusual way, but that's what Terry chose to name the city. Cool, but also a little bit like, a little bit on the nose there, but okay. Terry and Soren talk about Claudia, then we immediately cut to, where is she? And she seems to be somewhere. And she just looks up at the sky and says, 7 years. And it's like, what's happening here? Where is she? Because the portal she went through led to the top of a tower, and then when Soren and Corvus went through, she was there, but then she left and went somewhere. I'm like, has she somehow found her way to be on one of his stars? Like, what does that mean? And is she with him waiting, or is she just somewhere on the world waiting for his return? I think maybe they were kind of going for that she's somewhere near the Sea of the Cast Out, maybe waiting for him to return, but we have to wait and see. We then get the finally, Runan and Ezran talk, so fully referencing back to the start of the season. Very passionate speech from Runan, kind of showing the kind of progress across the series, that even Runan has understood like what has happened since then, and kind of the error in the way he viewed being an assassin overall. Ezran will forgive him, though it might take a bit of time. He asks if, hey, did my father, when it happened, did he have any last words? And we get the flashback sequence, and yeah, apparently Harrow just turned around and squawked at Runan. And it's just this complete kind of mood-cutting scene that's like, really? You are, after all of this time, doing this reveal that Harrow had the whole soul switch thing with the bird. The theory that everyone has had for such a long time is actually the case. Corvus talks vaguely about, there are rumors that I've heard something, which I'm guessing would probably have to be a bird speaking human words. So yeah, they're going to go off in search of the Harrow bird, effectively. Now, what do we do with this when we get him back, if we do get him back? I guess we have a talking bird. Are we going to try and do something with that? Because I don't think there's any way we're getting him back in human form necessarily. So, bit of an odd one certainly here. It takes away some of the crazy intensity between Runan and Ezran, in that like Harrow is alive in some form, but what does it really amount to? I'm not really sure. It's one of those ones where like this was probably maybe better used in earlier seasons to do something, but we'll see what happens. I don't really know what to make of it right now. Notably, the Key of Aravos played like no role whatsoever doing anything, pretty much. But as we cut to this scene with Callum and Rayla, we do briefly see a map that Callum has drawn, and he notes all these lines on it, which I guess refer to stuff in relation to the key in specific areas of the world. But then also the name Ilarion is specifically mentioned. And again, this is the place that Sol Regum attacked in the whole Ziard kind of flashback sequence. So what the takeaway from that is, I'm not entirely sure overall. Does this maybe relate to the whole really vague lore from last season where like Sol Regum killed his mate? That kind of came out of absolutely nowhere, and I think left myself and a lot of people wondering, like, were we meant to know some of this stuff? Like, he buried her alive, like, where, when, what was this incident? Like, is this in relation to one of these other scenes? Was it in relation to this? I don't actually know. There is a kind of cute Callum and Rayla scene, which is pretty nice. Like, overall, their relationship I thought was pretty well done here, just because there wasn't any kind of drama to it. And again, this is another scene that probably highlighted that, yeah, this isn't a finale. Because this borderline comes across as a will you marry me scene, but they don't actually do that like at all in it. It's just kind of randomness, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, this ends the season, but then we do get this moment, this cut-in moment of, we learn what Leola's last wish actually is. So, of course, there's the constellation called Leola's Last Wish, but this is what it actually is. And again, Leola is Aravos' daughter. So her last wish was, I wish that even in the dark, sad, afraid, alone, that every child should know you are loved. So, very interesting one in that, very clearly, I think, with Aravos, we have not done, I think, the final villain characterization with him, because we have not really had, I think, him maybe acknowledge what his own daughter would think about kind of what he is doing. And I think to a certain degree, this statement maybe needs to be thrown back in his face, that like, this is what your daughter believed in. She was friends with everyone, I think was sort of the idea that we got. And look at what you're doing. You're kind of pitting everyone against each other. And that's certainly something that I think we need to see happen. Now, in what way can we accomplish this? Is there any way to sort of bring Leola back in some way, or find words that she spoke to kind of give over to Arvos? I'm not really sure, but this feels like it has to be important. But then also, I don't know if we can just take out Arvos without addressing like what's going on with the other Star Touch elves, and the fact that the Cosmic Order does seem to be a massive problem that has kind of fundamentally caused a big part of the rift between humans and Xadians in the first place. So yeah, there's fundamental things that are still in place here. It's definitely some sort of an arc ending, but it to me does feel like the series is like 66% complete, maybe 75% complete, and it absolutely still needs another couple of seasons, a good few more episodes to resolve this. This was not good enough, but like I kind of covered, there's still a lot of pretty solid stuff going on. It just gets a little bit messy because it's clearly not the finale, even though it's trying to kind of be the finale. Hard to properly talk about super kind of accurately. But yeah, like I wouldn't say there's that much that goes on here that's just like bad necessarily. It's just the messiness of like, is every arc perfect? Is every arc super strong? No, there is some stuff that gets more attention or feels stronger than other things, but it's mostly okay. I think a lot of the frustration maybe just comes down to they constructed a lot of stuff to make the finale complicated, but ultimately I didn't really care too much about the whole plot point of like inverting the moon nexus and what he was really about trying to do that, especially when you weren't going to involve the other star elves. That was odd. The prophecy, like knowing the future with Astrid thing, felt like, well, we did it, so we have to continue through with it, but we don't really want to use it, was definitely what I took from that. And then, yeah, I've never been a big fan of Dark Callum, so a lot of that build up to, I'm going to have to switch to using dark magic, and, you know, Rayla might have to kill me type situation, which, again, references stuff from last season where there was that kind of promise made between the two of them, but I never really bought into it because it's just, imagine they had actually gone through with that where Rayla is forced to kill Callum. Even if they did that really well, that is such a negative thing to do for your main romance. It's like actually kind of crazy, but so in that sense they kept themselves from doing anything super crazy to open the door to, assuming they get more seasons, better stuff. But are they going to get more seasons? I don't know. Do Netflix have in any way reasonable numbers for the show to hit to earn its remaining seasons? I'm not sure. I think there probably will be enough of a response in terms of like, hey, you said this was the final season. It's not the final season. We need more. I think there should be enough to get it. We'll see what happens though. I haven't been maybe super inspired by the marketing for this season if they needed to do super well. I think they just took the game that they took ages to develop off Netflix as well, so there's been some questionable things maybe happening with the franchise, but we'll see what happens. So yep, I'm still pretty positive on the show, but they probably from a marketing point of view made this needlessly messy by the whole, it's the final season, but the takeaway from the end is that this is not the final season. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the Dragon Prince Season 7 Dark. Where do you think things are going? Will we get the remaining seasons or not? What did you like? What did you not like from the season? Let me know. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.